For those unaware about the terrible deeds committed by 51-year-old Daniel Farrands, allow me to fill you in. Daniel Farrands, for a short time, was well known for making documentaries off of infamous horrific events, as well as being a screenwriter for films such as Halloween 6, and the producer behind the latest Amityville film starring Bella Thorne, as well as the producer behind his directorial debut, which he went over the Amityville murders again. Now, despite not realizing that he was a part of the production process when I first reviewed Amityville The Awakening, I didn't fully get a hold of the gravity of just how atrocious this was going to get, right up until he released the universally panned The Haunting of Sharon Tate back in April of 2019. I got a hold of the movie after I finished Once Upon a Time in Hollywood around August of the same year, and now that I have seen it, it's pretty much one of the worst films I've ever seen in my entire life, as well as my worst film of last year. There were no real high points, nothing really made any sense, it was cheap, exploitive, tasteless in every sense of the word, and it truly struck home for me how desperate some people were willing to go just to get attention and milk out more cash. And now, we have the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson, another tragic retelling of two famous murders committed by O.J. Simpson. The biggest takeaway from this movie is perhaps the film's biggest WTF moment. It deduces that O.J., in fact, wasn't the real killer. Yeah, this wasn't going to end well, regardless of whatever I got around to it. But unlike the previous film, I'm willing to give these jackasses just a little bit more credit before I start, okay? One of the biggest takeaways from Haunting of Lizzie McGuire was that they had the audacity, the nerve, the temerity to actually release that carcass out to theaters when they knew full well that nobody was going to go see it. Here, though, it appears they've learned a lesson, in a way, because this carcass went straight to DVD. So in that aspect, it's slightly more tolerable. But outside of that and that alone, what exactly did this movie have to offer?
Nothing! Absolutely nothing!
From a technical, artistic, and ethical standpoint, everything that was wrong with The Haunting of Lizzie McGuire is done just as badly, if not worse here. And I wish I was exaggerating that. There really is no excuse for anybody to make a movie that is this completely devoid of content, innovation, or basic common sense, even by the already low standard bar of horror shovelware.
I want to start off by saying that The Murder of Nicole Brown Simpson is not only the worst movie of 2020, it is the worst movie I have ever seen, and is also the worst movie that anyone can see. Daniel Farrands is a director that I somewhat admire because he has directed some of my favorite documentary films, specifically Never Sleep Again and Camp Crystal Lake Memories. I think he tried to turn his career around and he started making narrative films. And the films that he's made 3 movies. Every single film has gotten worse. Most famously, he is known for The Haunting of Sharon Tate, and this movie manages to be even worse.
I'm just gonna say this guy needs to stop making movies. I don't know how or why this happened, but based on what I watched, this man has a tendency to trash on films that were inspired by real life events that makes them into something memorable. But not in a good way, in a very, very, very bad way. And it's the kind of bad that makes you feel like you want to vomit and feel completely grossed out.
Mina Suvari is known mostly for starring in the American Pie film series, as well as Slums of Beverly Hills and Sugar and Spice. This bears an uncanny resemblance to what Hilary Duff's resume actually looks like right now. Both actresses are involved in mostly comedy films with a handful of dramas attached as well, so both of their acting prowesses have improved significantly as they got older. But because they're mostly comedy actresses, at least from what I've been able to recollect, their deliveries here can range from solid to slightly average to sweet lord who accepted that take! It may have just been the direction they were forced to take, but my god, I mean, it's not even just Mina. Every other actor in this movie suffers from the exact same problem, lacking an extreme amount of depth and memorability to any of the roles, despite the two main leads actually doing the best they can. As a matter of fact, I guarantee you if E.L. James had been brought on to write the script, I'm positive she would have at least gotten something right by accident. But at the same time, given James's past history, I wouldn't be surprised if she already had written out these characters way before the post-production stage, because these guys are acting like teenagers again. And my oh my, why does that sound so freaking familiar? And then there are the complete lack of characters involved. No, I'm not exaggerating. There weren't any characters at all in this movie. At least not any that had any identifiable character trait other than mean-spiritedness or just plain idiocy. Like, can somebody please tell me why dumb, stupid characters have become a popular horror staple in Hollywood? Because I never understood it back then, and I still don't now. With a very, very slight exception in Nicole. Every other character in this movie is either one-dimensional or slightly two-dimensional at large, and that's at best.
The writing is probably my least favorite part in this movie. and it's because the dialogue is somehow worse than the one in The Haunting of Sharon Tate.
Oh my bloody Jesus, sweet Mary Lord. Okay, you get the usual pretentious dialogue that played down his last movie. You know, bits and pieces and splashes of dialogue foreshadowing or exploiting the inevitable of what's bound to happen, like it's trying to be deep.
I'm worried he's going to kill me one day and he's going to get away with it.
You know, after he's killed me, you people can live with the fact that you never did a thing about it.
But it's really cringy at the end of the day, and there's really no subtlety. But whatever little shreds of maybe naivete the predecessor had is completely erased here. You feel every manipulative BS cookie-cutter shred of blatant emotional manipulation in every word spoken, and the script does a terrible job at hiding it. Do I even need to emphasize the point where she says,
And to be completely honest, I miss the sex sometimes.
"Who does that? Who says that?"
I feel like Nicole Brown Simpson was misrepresented in this movie. In this movie, she is portrayed as a really stupid person who will sleep with any man that barely helps her. And the film makes it look like it's her fault that she got killed.
What bothers me is that there are people in your life staring you right in the face, in fact, who actually give a shit about what happens to you. Maybe you shouldn't try so hard to push us away.
Like, seriously, we're supposed to believe this crap.
You fell back into his trap. Because you're fucking stupid girl. You don't listen. It's before it's too late. But you don't listen. You don't listen to any of the friends. That man will be the death of you. And don't say I didn't warn you, okay?
Daniel really did not want the audience to empathize with the victims, now did he? But, luckily and unluckily, I did find out that Daniel didn't write this film this time. Oh, no. It was actually taken up by someone named Michael Arter, who just so happened to be part of the miscellaneous crew for The Haunting of Lizzie McGuire. Can somebody please tell me how he went from being a part of the crew to writing the frickin' screenplay? Even more so, if this was the very first script he ever wrote? Why did you just take a random Yahoo out from your miscellaneous crew with no screenwriting credit or experience and just shove him up to the front lines with no leeway on what to do or even where to go from there? Help me! Do I even need to remind you guys that the technical aspects fail, once again, to engage the viewer while presenting at times what appears to be a low-budget slasher film? This is the visual aesthetic of a cable TV movie, a Lifetime Hallmark movie on the channel, for Christ's sake. All the camera work is it's just abysmal here. Outside of it moving around a lot and looking and feeling very sloppy, there was a point where I literally couldn't see anything within the first 2 minutes of the movie. Other times, it's shaky to where it becomes a minor annoyance, and they do sloppily and lazily repeat scenes. 2 times when it was just outside Nicole's house, and 2 where it draws back to her long, drawn-out, elongated therapeutic sessions. They were exactly the same. I shit you not. Take the day and night setting away, and they're shot for shot exactly the same scenes. And don't worry, the editing isn't smooth also. It becomes a big problem when there's this news footage that comes along at the beginning and end of the movie, and they're just absolutely atrocious. Once again, the film has no idea what it wants to be or even how to present itself as. An actual biopic, a documentary, a feminist film. Yeah, they do try to sprinkle in some rather toxic lines that are supposed to be empowering, but it just made me facepalm because of massive media attention, or a Hallmark movie because it sporadically jumps back and forth thanks to the pacing. Compared to its predecessor, this film felt a lot longer than 88 minutes, and yet the added stock footage drags it out for far too long of a time period. And of course, there's no real scares. The film relies very heavily on the ominous music and lighting effects to pass as an attempt to delve itself into some kind of horror flick, and then there's this one particular scene where, I shit you not, rips off A Nightmare on Elm Street shot for shot, pixel by pixel, movement by movement. It is literally the exact same scene, just shoveled into a lesser exciting, pretentious, glorified sack of... well, you know what. Just when you think there's not going to be any haunting or any paranormal shit going on, that shows up right out of nowhere, and it kills whatever pacing or tone the film has. But not so much as the ending broke the film and shattered its overall foundation into oblivion. Spoilers ahead, not that anybody's going to care. So, basically, if you must know, the murders finally occurred by midnight, or at least close to it.
Now, in the eventual murder scene, it is shown in a graphic,
Appalling.
detailed,
Disgusting.
grotesque way where it's very degrading and it just glorifies this violence of this tragic death. It's extremely disgusting. It's extremely gross. It is made poorly anyway because it's shot in 24 frames per second and it's been slowed down to make it look like it's slow motion. However, it's so choppy because there's not that many frames per second. You should have shot it at 140 or 160.
Now, it's bad enough that this entire sequence was filmed in such a horrific way, similar to that of a slasher film, but then Daniel has the freaking temerity to show off the actual dead bodies. And no, I don't mean in the previous flick where they just bring out the bodies covered in the body bag. No. I mean the actual blood-soaked, nearly decapitated bodies of the people who just died, and Daniel holds on to these uncomfortable pictures and images for a while. Like, he was proud of this. Regardless, it's totally inexcusable, but it gets worse from there. So going on with spoilers, alright? So, this movie also implies, but doesn't outright say, that the ghost of Charles Manson was involved in these murders. Yeah, that's right. This dumbass briefly squeezed in another notorious mass murderer into the foot of another famous mass murderer as an attempt to engineer a cinematic universe connecting the murders of famous women, with Manson being the thread that unites them all. And guess what? Daniels and Arthur didn't even bother to explain the change whatsoever, thanks to the ending breaking the film's own godforsaken rules!
In the newsreel footage at the end of the movie, it cuts to O.J. Simpson admitting that he was there the night that Nicole Brown Simpson was murdered. Even though in the scene where she was murdered, there was only one person.
And then they continue to spit in your face even more when they play Nicole's real-life 911 calls at the end of the movie. You don't get to present a feature film that says OJ didn't do it and then play her real 911 calls of getting abuse from OJ. It's a stark reminder of the absolute bad faith of the people involved in this lousy production, and I honestly don't know why this kind of stuff continues to piss me off. For some reason, a film flat out cutting out its own sort of continuity within the timeline and not even trying to hide it still feels like a new low! On the off chance you didn't really get the entire gist of this review, because it came off a lot more shoutier than I intended it to be, this is probably the best film that describes 2020 as a whole. Almost everything that was wrong with The Haunting of Lizzie McGuire rears its ugly head here once again, only this time it varies. Acting is still mostly trash, directing is still utterly incompetent, and it's another film that she was a real-life tragedy because the dumbass had nothing better to do. Except here, there are no characters, cinematography is messy and wobbly with editing that's haphazardly slapped together, the writing is completely nonsensical, it fails to address the only elephant in the room regarding OJ's involvement in the crime, and with this dull, boring, monotonous, repetitive, malodorous tripe of a film trying to set up an ultimate murderer franchise that isn't even narratively sound, you could tell there was not an ounce of give a damn anywhere in this entire production. And that's all before we get to the actual ending of the movie that tries to shamelessly Trojan horse the cinematic universe by playing Schrodinger's cat with the timeline and gives so little of a crap that it doesn't even try to hide it.
Everything in this movie, in a writing standpoint, is worse than The Haunting of Sharon Tate, which is kind of mind-blowing because you have made one of the most hated movies ever made, and you somehow managed to make a movie that is guaranteed to get more hate than the last movie you made. And is also kind of impressive too.
Now, even though that there is a crime that occurred in the film, I was able to discover a new crime that took place. The existence of this so-called movie. This flaming hot piece of shit is a crime for even existing in cinema. But worst of all, existing in 2020. I do not know how this guy was able to make another movie, and honestly, we will never know. But it is not humanly possible to make a film that is actually worse than the previous one. What I watched was truly the bottom of the barrel entertainment. And I'm not just talking about the floor bottom, the ocean bottom, or even rock bottom. I am talking about the deepest depths of hell bottom.
Seriously, I feel like Beelzebub is ballsack for drawing even more attention to this movie than it deserves. Daniel has potentially ruined careers because of his decision to torpedo the entire selling point of both movies only to paint gargantuan levels of extreme that alienate the truth of both stories. I don't know what's more pathetic, the fact that he spat on the graves and legacies of those two dead people and then proceeded to lash out at anybody who didn't agree with his vision, or the fact that when the actual families of the victims actively called him out on his BS, he immediately sent out condescending messages trying to paint himself as the victim for a cheap get-out-of-criticism free card. It's still a terribly written, terribly directed, terribly made movie based on a terrible premise, and I can't forgive him for that. In retrospect, though, something about me still finds The Haunting of Lizzie McGuire to be more insufferable here. Okay, don't misunderstand me. I didn't have a good time with any one of these films. They're both monotonous, tedious, repetitive, and so incredibly tasteless and difficult to sit through at the same time that I had the urge to break my laptop. But given how I already knew what I was getting myself into and then some, the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson actively depressed me more than actively angered me with how little anybody seemed to care about this thing. This film, though, it's not just the subject matter they decided to exploit the tragedy on in the worst way imaginable. It's not just the fact that Hilary Duff was in a position that literally halted her revival before it could really get back off of the ground. It's not just the fact that a major motion picture studio signed onto the project and it was released in theaters in the first place. What really makes this film worse than Murder of Nicole Brown Simpson, at least to me, was the fact that this film was so harped on and massacred to the point where Daniel actually went out of his way to censor any, if not all, negative backlash that he could find. And the worst part of all of that? This film still won 3 awards for its shit quality. That alone was enough to piss me off and making me hate life more than this one did. I'm not saying Murder of Nicole Brown Simpson is a better movie. I'm saying The Haunting of Lizzie McGuire with its dysfunctional, self-obsessed roadmap of marketing strategies and utter lack of responsibility is worse. But don't think for a single second that I'm giving this follow-up the benefit of the doubt here. My condolences to Nicole and Ron Goldman's family. You did not deserve this to be happening to you.